Before I start, a quick introduction to InnoMinds. InnoMinds is a product engineering and digital solutions company. We've been in business for more than 20 years. We're based out of San Jose in the Bay Area, right in the heart of the Silicon Valley in the US. And in India, we have offices in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Noida, Chennai, Pune, etc. We're about 1,200 people strong, and we're almost exclusively in the digital space. We do a lot of the cutting edge things such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, connected devices, cloud, and design and modern user experiences, and so on. And the deck that we are presenting and the demos that we have, that we're going to show are actually our projects that we have already delivered, and you'll be able to see the kind of experience that we have in these spaces, and how we perceive risk, and how we actually enable enterprises to do risk and compliance in a much more sophisticated way. Right. So if you look at risk in general, and as they say, right, if you look at GRC, the governance, risk, and compliance aspects, a lot goes through a GRC setup, including things like having a strategy for governance, risk, and compliance, having a policy and a set of standards that you wanted to achieve through GRC, and coming from that or emanating from those strategy and policies are some of your mechanisms, such as the information security architecture that you would take, right, both from an enterprise applications point of view as well as other network and communication infrastructure, and then the certifications and accreditations that you would target, and finally sensitizing the entire organization towards risk and compliance, and ensuring that you are creating the awareness and having those trainings, and that everybody is alert towards the GRC. So while these are the things that are more at a policy and strategy and a general application systems level, what you actually do from a risk and compliance point of view, from a day-to-day level, are things like measuring the compliance, either by way of say an audit, or by way of say going through some of the the risks that you have, and the controls, and the compliance to those controls, and how effective those controls are. And you also do the incident management to let people report anything that they find as untoward or not in compliance, and you actually take through a workflow of that incident. You do the threat and vulnerability, because threats and vulnerabilities are not static, they're changing all the time, both technology wise as otherwise. And then you are constantly assessing your ability to withstand those threats, and ensure that the vulnerability is managed. And you also look at risks again are not static. There are new risks coming in all the time, all aspects of the business, not just financials and money related part, but in general all the risks. And you look at that and see what mechanisms you need to have to be guarding against those risks. So what we think is that apart from the policy and strategy and the thinking aspects of the GRC, which is what is mostly driven by management and leadership, and is what humans and the human effort should go to, the other aspects, particularly the operational part of the risk, which is what we call as the operations risk, is very suitable to an AI kind of a setup. And AI actually not only ensures that you have a framework that scales and guards the enterprise against all of these risks, but is also able to uncover risks that we've not thought of. And we'll be trying to focus on these areas in the rest of the webinar. And if you look at AI and why you would need AI, and AI is relatively a new phenomenon, right? Even though the word itself is coined about 30 years, and much of the advances in AI have happened in the last 2 decades, risk and governance has been there for centuries. So probably you would question as to what would be probably the need for AI. in risk and governance, which has withstood, the centuries and done quite well too. I think the answer to that is the scale of operations that we are doing today, and an enterprise is doing today, and the ways in which it is exposed, and the ways in which it is vulnerable, has not been the same as before. Uh, and today companies operate in multiple countries, in multiple fronts, in multiple domains, and in the net scale. For example, even if you look at a bank and assess the risk in terms of the total assets that are under its control, AUM, assets under management, it's far too higher than what it used to do before. And that's where I think we believe that AI is the answer to supplement the natural intelligence and the human endeavor, and ensure that the human endeavor is more scalable, and that the human endeavor is supplemented through a framework that is less likely to commit mistakes, right? So that's where we think that AI can complement the human effort. And we see AI actually addressing four aspects of risk and compliance, as you see in the left, the threat and vulnerability management. So in terms of threats, and what is the impact and the likelihood of the threat, the classic analysis of PIA, probability impact assessment. Today AI can help you in quantitatively measuring the extent of impact that a threat would have, and also quantitatively measuring the probability of occurrence of any of the threats, so that then it gives you a very solid framework to take a necessary control and a mitigation mechanism against that. Not just that, it also helps us to measure on a continuous basis any threats, and also any new threats, and alert for the occurrence of a threat, or a very subtler pattern to a threat, and then allow the humans to then investigate, and then put in appropriate remedial measures, or controls. In addition, on the risk management side, for example, and we will have some of the projects that we have done that we will be able to showcase here. The entire life cycle of risk, in terms of defining a risk, measuring, and putting a mitigating, and then seeing the residual risk, and ensuring that the mitigation as well as the residual risk can be managed, and also the ability to detect rare events, right? So, and this is one of the things that I personally believe that humans are not so good at, the ability to pick rare events. And those of you who must have, studied the financial crisis of 2005 to 7, and also the subsequent analysis of that, and you must have heard of this term, the black swan too, right? So we generally, humans are not so good at picking up the rare events. We tend to, gloss over, or not have the adequate oversight onto that, and these things actually build up, and then they cause things like, say, bubbles, which is what the 2007 crisis was about, or other other breakdowns of systems, and then leading to bigger catastrophes and so on. So that's where artificial intelligence can help in managing the risk and the risk life cycle, and provide a quantitative way to do that. Incident management is another great example of how AI can be used. Incidents are many, and I have seen that typically two things happen with incidents: that almost every enterprise and business has an incident management process, as well as an incident management tool, to let employees actually go through whatever they're seeing around them, and then report any incidents, etc. Unfortunately, where probably most of these fail is that either the incident rate is too few, in the sense that employees do not report enough incidents because they don't believe that anything will happen out of it, or they're too high, and therefore what happens is that critical and important incidents, which should be treated more severely and seriously, tend to get buried under the rest of the incidents. In either cases, actually AI can help, that if there is a way for an AI to assess all incidents, and provide a mechanism and a response to the employees that this incident has been analyzed, it has been taken care of in this manner, etc., then that actually encourages people to put more incidents. And secondly, by actually doing the right triaging and sifting through the incidents and bouncing up those incidents that have a greater impact, AI can ensure that the incidents are adequately addressed and the most important ones are taken care of, and so on. And lastly, on the compliance side, compliance is a huge responsibility in every enterprise, and it's not just for regulatory reasons. Enterprises and companies have to protect their brands and give that feeling of trust amongst its stakeholders, particularly investors and consumers, that their information, their assets, their interests are taken care of in that enterprise. And the human way of doing compliance, while it has survived centuries, I believe needs some support. And compliance is not only about just the repetitive effort of doing something as per a particular process, but also being alert to things that are changing, things that are that are new, and also keeping pace with the rate of change in the standards and the regulation and the legislation also in many cases thereof. So AI can help in all of these aspects. And also must mention that compliance actually has become a high priority for governments. We all have heard of the GDPR, the regulation for data privacy in the Europe, and which gives the control to the individual on what aspects of the individual's data can be stored and for what purpose it could be used, and so on, and gives the control to the individual to ensure that if they are not consenting to their use of their data, that the enterprises are able to delete that from their storage systems and ensure that the privacy of the individual is protected. Now, ensuring the compliance to that kind of a legislation, the GDPR, is a humongous effort, and particularly given that there are several legacy systems that are not ready to do that. It is important that an AI system can first help in uncovering the personally identifiable information, creating a digital fingerprint for the individual, so that we are able to establish the identity of data with that digital fingerprint, provide the ability of lineage across data again back to the individual, so that when an archival decision or a delete decision has to happen, you are not just removing the front data, but the entire data through the entire lineage out. So these are I think aspects of compliance that AI can enable. And given the fact that today data is not just structured in the form of databases and files, etc., and also involves a lot of semi-structured data like logs, and also the data from consumers in the form of, say, video, voice, images, etc., then it becomes even more important that we are able to deal with this kind of unstructured data and appropriately process it, both by way of say, storage as well as other processing. And this is again where the AI becomes very important on the compliance side. So that's on the AI and how it can support the risk and compliance. And we thought that we will relate what we talked to an event that is on the top of our minds. We all have seen this scam unfold, the Punjab National Bank scam unfold. It's a loss of about 11,500 crores of taxpayers' money, and of course, it's a big loss of repute to the bank. And not just that, the other bank and the banks are also involved, and of course, they are putting the pressure on PNB to honor the letters of undertaking that they have given, and they've sought the help of RBI. But this can easily cascade to a much larger problem than the PNB. And we thought we will see as to how what failed in the PNB, and how AI could have partially helped in ensuring that we could have avoided this failure. So, what caused the failure? Most of you must have read about it, must have read opinions about it. I would actually, put the cause of failure on three reasons. The first one being that the lack of managerial oversight and focus, and quite clearly, as we saw that the level of focus that was required to put in a policy for risk and ensuring that there were adequate controls to it was missing. So the prime example of that is that how transactions could be done outside their core banking system, and what controls could be established on those transactions that are not going through the CBS. The second thing is clearly no enough oversight of how these controls are actually working. If they really had that kind of an oversight, they would have seen that there were a lot of things that were unusual, with respect to that Mr. Shetty, who was involved in this case and who got arrested. And lastly, there is a bit of interbank complicity that much of these banks' senior leadership and management actually has worked in multiple banks, and they bring their relations and trusts from those banks to this new bank, and the new bank actually does not do enough due diligence and things like KYC, etc., on those relations that are coming from the other banks, and therefore it becomes a vulnerable, or that actually exposes a risk. And in this case, what is evident here, that the companies in question here, the Geetanjali Gems, had a good relation with Allahabad Bank, and those relations were brought to PNB. I'm sure PNB trusted the relation had with Allahabad Bank, and as a result, maybe not enough due diligence was done, and it's the failure of that is there for all of us to see. A second reason why we think the failure occurred is the audit process. A strong internal audit as well as an independent auditor would have actually made the management and the board responsible for their internal processes and ensuring that risk and compliance were adequately taken care of. But quite clearly, this is a failure of the audit process, both the internal as well as the independent and external audit. Examples of that are, the SWIFT transactions were not part of the core banking. Not sure why they were allowed, and even if they were allowed, what kind of a mechanism was there to ensure that it was used very sparingly and only as an exception. Multiple logins were allowed to be created by individuals so that they could use these multiple logins. There were no limits on the funds at various levels, at an individual level, an account level, a company level, etc. Nor were margins, which is a mandate, that these letters of undertaking are backed by margins, and the necessary assets and collateral were adequately enforced. So the audit did not capture that. The LOEs were issued for a much longer period than typical 90 days. So nobody questioned that. And also the velocity and the size of LOEs kept increasing. Quite clearly, it was unusual and abnormal, and no audit process could capture that. These were increasing both from a size and velocity perspective. And also, I believe that there are other banks too, which are responsible, particularly the overseas branches. I worked in ICICI Bank, and I remember that we were very gung-ho about taking ICICI Bank to global, and we had overseas branches and set up in all the countries where there were predominant Indian presence. But from my experience, I could tell that the overseas branches are very different. They are exposed to a far higher degree of risk, and to a far higher degree of uncertainty than the local branches. We know quite well, how it runs in India, how it operates in India. The overseas are not the same, kettle of fish. And I believe there has to be better control on these overseas branches. Unfortunately, none of these overseas branches of other banks questioned that these letters of undertaking were for a longer period than 90 days. They could have clearly asked questions back to the PNB in terms of how PNB was issuing these letters of undertaking. They gladly accepted them, and now they are complaining that PNB is saying that they may not actually honor all the letters of undertaking. So I believe that even the rest of the banking system is partially responsible for this crisis. So to now moving ahead, how it could have been avoided, quite clearly, a strong policy and a strong management focus and oversight into this, and coupled with a strong audit process, and both internal and external would have clearly stopped it. But there are limitations in what humans can do, and that's exactly what we are trying to sort of convey here, that AI could have helped. And the reason is threefold: that you cannot have systems which are 100% dependent on humans for just two reasons. One, that in many cases humans are complicit, and a report by Carnegie Mellon University has concluded that of all the financial fraud that occurs, right, most of the fraud relates to some amount of compromise made by an insider, right? Most amount of it, and though there are no exact numbers to it, most of the fraud relates to somewhere some insider being complicit to that fraud. And worse still, 50% of these insiders are managers and leadership, who not only design the systems, which is basically the risk management and the control system, but also who implement and ensure that the governance is there and so on. So if 50% of insider fraud is done by managers, then what is the protection against humans and the managers there, right? So this is exactly why a system cannot be 100% dependent on humans. And secondly, humans, like, as I said, cannot uncover deep patterns that easily, for lack of time, for lack of attention, lack of maybe focus, etc. Humans cannot uncover deeper patterns. For example, if you again go back to the PNB case, you would see that the person has been for an unusually long time at that job, right? And it's difficult for humans to be thinking along that line and getting all the data, and then seeing who are the people who have stayed very long at the bank without actually inconveniencing a lot of people. But an AI or a machine learning algorithm can do that effortlessly and then provide reports who are unusually put at the same job for a long time. A second way in which it could have been uncovered was that a particular individual had a very high, unusually high number of transactions with a particular company, way above any other individual with any other company. This is again difficult for a human to pick. Similarly, a particular individual had a unusually high use of the same instrument, a letter of undertaking in this case, right? So an AI engine would go through all the data of the bank in this case and try to through all these unusual patterns. Of course, a lot of those may be false positives, that those are legitimate aspects of the business, but at least by objectively and unbiasedly, right, and in a way that it cannot be tampered, if it can actually escalate these unusual things that are happening with respect to a business, then it is up to the management and the leadership to necessarily evaluate and assess and provide a mechanism to address this, or at least be satisfied that it is legitimate business, right? And lastly, it's also about cost and scale of humans. Humans are, having said, are going to be more expensive, and to have 100% human-based system to basically track the entire operations of an enterprise is going to be humongously expensive. And also the scale of humans. Again, humans are not so good at doing repetitive tasks, and they tend to skip or jump some of the attention on these repetitive tasks as well. So that the scale of humans also is a problem. So this is how we think AI could have solved the Punjab National Bank, and maybe even avoided it, right? And that's the overview on the AI. We would like to quickly walk you through some of the work that we have done, and how we basically did those. For example, as you see on the left top, we actually have an insider threat management solution that we have developed. that actually tracks all the activities of insiders, whether it is employees or contractors or other staff in an office, all their activities, not only physical but also digital, and checks any unusual or any suspicious activity of this. So we developed this insider threat model. It's a machine learning based model, and scores each individual for the likelihood of that individual being an insider, and an adequate remedial action can be taken based on those scores. A second use case we have developed is to have an SIEM, which is the Security Information and Event Management. This actually fits in under the incident management process that we talked about before. So this allows people to report any security event or an information, and it has automation in terms of the pipeline, in terms of how those incidents are analyzed, how they are prioritized, the triaging or the severity aspects of the incidents, and also the response, in terms of some of the automation, in terms of the response to that incident. A third use case is in preventing fraud. We did various types of fraud prevention with respect to, say, fund transfers, payments, credit cards, etc. Fraud is moving towards behavioral analytics. So it's not just simple rule-based, fraud that you are accessing the mobile banking application from, say, a new city, right? Or you're accessing the web from a new browser, or from, say, a new Mac ID. So those are simple rule-based, lot of false positives in such cases, which may affect the customer experience, but maybe worth it in order to ensure that the risk protection is there. But we have done much more than the rule-based fraud prevention, gone into the behavioral aspects of fraud. So example of that is that if it is mobile banking, we are able to put the entire behavior of how a consumer uses the mobile banking, in terms of how often he logs in or she logs in, what is the frequently accessed menus, when was the password changed, when was the last access, right, when was the last fund transfer. So you name it, as a matter of fact, I think there were more than 1,000 features that we used in defining the behavior of an individual on mobile banking or on the website. A last use case is the cloak computing, which is a new paradigm of computing, where you do not expose your IT systems to outside. You put a cloak around that, and I'll not go too much into detail, but what it will ensure is that nothing inside the cloak is visible to an external attacker, and the attacker therefore does not know what's behind, and one has lesser incentive to attack, and two, even if he attacks, can be adequately addressed at the ring. So it's basically a perimeter security based mechanism coupled with a monitoring solution that ensures that even when the attacker is attacking the ring, there is the inside of the ring which is cordoned off. So we did a solution for that, and also solutions that will do intrusion detections and advanced persistent threats and things like that. So moving on, we did solutions around the profiling also, again, very important in the context of regulations such as GDPR and the privacy laws that are coming up in every country. India does have equivalent privacy laws, to protect the privacy and confidentiality of individual data. So profiling and ensuring that we're identifying PII and adequately addressing that, masking that, fingerprinting that. So we've done solutions around that. So all of these are backed by artificial intelligence and machine learning to provide that solution. We've also done will be doing some demos of these solutions very quickly, which basically does unstructured data management and allows us to summarize unstructured data and so on. And we we provided uniform or unified risk measurement and assessment framework on top of all of these underlying events, and provided ways for management to see the risks in the organization, and not just standard reporting of risk, that which is what most tools do, but also in, as I mentioned, uncovering everything that is unusual or everything that is changing about a business or enterprise and all aspects of the operations there, and provide that view to management as well. So those are some of the examples, and I'd like to go through the building blocks that we have to enable or support that solutions. One, we have a process of going through AI, so we can take any business problem and define the problem, and analyze the problem with the knowledge and with the domain of that problem, to ensure that we are able to translate that problem into a modeling or an algorithm problem, and then to go about doing the model or the algorithm itself. And we not only rely on common available algorithms, but we engineer and do algorithms of our own, and we've actually applied for patents in such kind of algorithms. And then we try various methods and validate, and there are methods to do that. For example, in the machine learning world, cross validation is a common technique to do that. And finally, we deploy the one that we think best suits the risk and the compliance protection that is required in an enterprise, and have a way to self-learn from time to time, and be ahead of the insiders and other threats. And to do this, in addition to the process framework, we have the fundamental building blocks of enabling AI. As you would appreciate, AI is not just about the algorithm, so it's not just about a TensorFlow or a Cafe or a CNTK platform. Applying algorithms such as a CNN or an RNN with an LSTM, with 3-gate LSTM, for example. It is much more than that. It involves enormous data pre-processing and heavy lifting. We call it actually data wrangling. So it involves acquisition of the data and creation of data pipelines. It involves dealing with both structured and unstructured data. In the case of structured data, it involves a bit of normalization, denormalization, cleansing, governance, and so on. In the case of unstructured data, it additionally involves feature extraction, and also encapsulation of the unstructured data in the form of numeric or quantitative data, because that's what we want at the end of the unstructured data, and so on. And then putting all of these data pipelines into a workflow, so that then the algorithm can be applied, and also the outcomes or the predictions then be integrated into a decision support system with a way to learn automatically through machine learning. And also with the help of technologies such as robotic process automation, we are able to learn from humans as they do their regular activity, and then and scale up the humans, and enable that the humans are far more effective and efficient than otherwise, right? And we have these building blocks. So an NLP pipeline block, an image processing block, and we have a distributed processing block, which can do all the data processing, including transformations in a distributed mode. We have a streaming engine which can actually take events asynchronously, process them, and respond back in near real time. And we also defined a maturity for AI. And those of you are interested, we can send you this more details on how we define this maturity at a raw level, at a layer one. We think that enterprises should be aware of artificial intelligence, and have the necessary infrastructure in the form of data pipelines and data engineering to be able to run algorithms at scale. And we call it having the necessary big data infrastructure. We call it big data as a service, BDAS. And one up, we would expect the enterprises to integrate all data from the entire enterprise than silos in terms of departments or line of businesses, right? And take an enterprise wide holistic view of it, and this always involves heterogeneous systems and polystructured data and so on. And integrating or providing a unified view to all of this is what we call integrated big data platform and as a service, IBDAS. And actually, InnoMinds has an accelerator in the form of this IBDAS. The next level of maturity is to learn from humans, the robotic process automation, and then to enable machines to take decisions. We call it as machine decision making. And here is where machines take the decisions, but of course supervised by humans. And the highest level of maturity is deep automation, where almost everything that humans can do, machines can do at scale, and probably at equal accuracy as well. So with this, I will pause, and we will do quick demos, and we will leave about 10 minutes for questions. We can actually extend, but we would like to complete the demos in about 10 minutes and have about 10 minutes for questions. Here is a case for image processing. We have surveillance cameras, particularly CCTV cameras inside every ATM, and we would want to see if these ATMs are having any untoward incidents, such as people coming with weapons and people actually wearing helmets, so they don't want to be detected, etc. So we solved this for a company in India, whose major customers are some of the banks such as Axis Bank. And here you will see the application of image processing and image classification to do this thing. So we will take two images and show you how it works. So here is an image of a person who is heavily masked and is in front of an ATM, and the camera has taken the shot of that person. And we would like to remind you that what we are showing is engineering demos, and we want to do that deliberately so that you get a feel for what's behind, and not just look at it from a business point of view. And as you see here, the image has been classified as a person wearing a mask, and when you set this up on a data pipeline in streaming mode, it immediately goes as an alert, and you can do any remedial action such as say notifying the security, etc. We will now do another image without a any untoward incident, and one with another with another untoward incident. As you see, the image here is a person with a crowbar, again in front of an ATM, and you see that, or it's a rifle butt. So you'll see that it is, the classification made is basically that, there is a mask, as well as, there is a tripod, or it's actually a rod, a metal rod that is held by the person. And we will see first one more image, and you see that it's impossible for humans to be constantly doing the surveillance in real time. And this is where we actually refer to the scale of operations in the using AI. So here is an image of a person with a gun, and also more than one person, which is also not allowed as per policy. And you'll see that the person with the gun has an assault rifle and an assault gun and so on. So we actually deployed this in one of our Indian customers, and on near real-time basis. And when we combined this with edge computing, actually where we ported this machine learning onto the camera itself being a Raspberry Pi device, so it has processor and storage. We are able to avoid routing the image feed to the cloud, which can induce delays, and make decisions locally on the edge itself, and thereby it can alert people near the edge, like say the security, or it can actually cause a siren to be blown and things like that. So this is an example of how AI can scale up the risk and compliance aspects, and do things that are very expensive and also difficult for humans to manage surveillance and computer vision and camera based risk and compliance is an example of that. Yeah, we would now move to the next project that we have done. This is in the aspect of compliance. As per the privacy and confidentiality regulation and laws, the information about credit card, the social security number in the case of US, for example, are very sensitive and they are not supposed to be stored anywhere again. And a customer of ours asked us to therefore they run a contact center, and they asked us to redact these sensitive information from all of their audio recordings or their audio files, and this is mandated by law, and they had to ensure this without any breach. So this was not possible to be done with humans again, and the sheer scale of recordings is humongous, about millions of audio files, and it's impossible for humans. So here is an example of how we do it with humans. We are now playing an audio recording which was the original recording of a customer speaking to a contact center agent.
My name is Sumit Das. My phone number is 8017028045. My credit card number is 2213-3427-4512-7422. This is a Visa credit card and the validity of the credit card is March 2007.
Yeah. So we will now apply machine learning to redact this this audio file. And this involves three steps. In the first step, it involves the translation or the transcription of the spoken voice into text, and then it involves it involves, as you can see, the transcription is available, and then it involves going through the redacting. So we'll now play the redacted file.
My name is Sumit Das. My phone number is 8. Card number is 2213-34. A Visa credit card and the validity of the credit card is March 2007.
Yeah, as you can see, the phone number and the credit card numbers were redacted, and our customer requested us to mute that part of the audio file which has the sensitive information. You can also actually add an external sound to it, or you can scramble it and only ensure that people with the right keys can unscramble it. So that's a solution to that we have done. We'll move to the third demo, which actually is about predicting compliance. So we have here we've done a solution for banks and financial services in the US who have to submit their compliance attestations of how they are dealing with their cyber resiliency operations. So the cyber resiliency operations involves generating an archive of all of their data and then putting that archive into a digital vault. And we have actually used a blockchain solution for that. And we are now trying to predict who is likely to comply and also the non-compliance aspects ahead of time, so that we are able to go there and then ask them. So as you see here, what you have here is a prediction involving sequence prediction. So the back end for this is a LSTM, which is a recurrent neural network, and it's therefore an equivalent of a time series prediction. And we are showing the predictions in terms of how many attestations are expected versus the actual expectation. And those of you are familiar with the world of stats, the way to measure these predictions by way of accuracy is the root mean square error or the MAPE. And as you see here, it's quite a low RMSE, which means that the predictions are fairly accurate. And want to do the last demo since you're running out of running out of time, involving processing text data. So again, this we have done for a customer of US, and they US enterprises have to submit their annual statements in the form of 10Q, 10K statements, etc. And then processes are there to check whether those 10K, 10Q statements are proper. And to that extent, processes check whether all the statements that are expected to be submitted in terms of the profit and loss, the balance sheet, the cash flow, and the equity statements are captured properly. And we would need that. And here is a text that we are copying, which involves the equity, transaction summary. And if you had noticed, we had not copied the header or the name of the equity table, the equity transactions table. And we are, by just the structure of the table, we are trying to predict whether the table is an equity table or not. And doing these predictions for all the other statements that you expect, you then can prepare a compliance report on the 10Q that all the necessary information that are supposed to be there are available. And the 10K 10Q actually is a XML HTML based standard for submission of the reports. And where available, we make use of the XML and the HTML attributes in addition to just the content itself, so that we are able to make more accurate predictions. So this, as you would have noticed, it's very engineering focused, and we deliberately wanted it to be that way so that you see what's behind. As you can see, it's running a Spark process, and the predicted class for that is the equity statement. And if you were to go back and actually see that the copied text is indeed a consolidated statement of stockholders' equity. We did not copy the title there. We only copied from the the left balance at January from the common stock. Yeah, we did, and we discovered that this is an equity transactions table. So that ends our demo. Thank you for being patient through these demos. And as you would have noticed, we deliberately again wanted to show various aspects of data, not just structured data that we got in the compliance use case, where we were trying to predict the compliance in terms of the attestations on the cyber resiliency, that's structured numeric data, time series data. But we also deliberately chose image processing, voice processing, as well as the text and the unstructured data thereof. So this is the nature of data increasingly, and enterprises must be able to deal with it, and that's where AI can be of enormous help. So we stop here, and we request you to ask any questions. We would take these questions for roughly about 10 minutes. Yeah, one question that was asked was, how long will it take to develop and deploy a particular AI-based solution? And although I would like to answer, it depends. But what we believe is, with our accelerators and accelerators in not only the data pipeline and the integrated big data that we mentioned, but also in the form of image processing, voice processing, etc., we would take anything between 6 weeks to 8 weeks to deploy an initial version of the solution, and then progressively make it more sophisticated later on. So another question is, what are the typical stacks and tools that we use for AI? Actually, it's a slide that we covered, which I actually went past very quickly. We use good bit of open source, but we also have our own proprietary tools as well. So as you see here, we use for data collection both batch and streaming through Kafka, etc. We also use data processing, mostly distributed technologies such as Spark, NiFi, Hive. And for the machine learning itself, we use the CNTK, TensorFlow, Torch, and OpenAI. Although for most production applications, we use TensorFlow. We also do training a bit on Keras as well. And for voice processing, there are many tools available. The Google speech to text API is quite powerful, although it is expensive. But we can also make use of some open source tools like CMU, Sphinx, etc. But working through the open source tools requires a lot of training and making them accurate, and that's where it can consume a lot of your effort, and that's where we believe that our accelerators that we have solve that problem much faster and much more reliably.
Yeah, there is another question, Ravi. Is there any free platform available to build a AI model?
Yes, there are many free platforms. Most of the platforms that I mentioned here are open source. They are covered under licenses such as Apache, MIT, BSD, etc., which means that in addition to researching and developing using that open source, you can also put those things in production, and you can also apply for an IP on any work that you may have done on top of those open source tools. So TensorFlow, OpenCV, OpenAI, Torch, all of these are open source platforms, and they can be used by all of us and deployed in production too.
There is another question. Are there any accelerators that we bring to the table which might help in expediting it? And so what is our typical approach for such engagements? Maybe we can do a POC, something on those lines is a question.
Yes. So that's a good question. So that's indeed what we bring to the table. Not only the resources in terms of tools and people who can work with the tools, but an accelerator which covers the 60% or 70% of the journey towards an AI solution, and it can involve the common data pipelines. For example, if you are dealing with text, then the accelerator is in the form of an NLP pipeline which can actually parse the text and extract such as keywords, concepts, sentiments, summarize the text, etc. And in the case of image, it could be feature extraction from the images. So those accelerators, help us in ensuring that we are only covering the rest of the 30% or 40% towards developing a solution. And these accelerators, the model that we work with is that we look at a problem and bring these accelerators to solve the base problem, and then with the help of either our resources, or we can actually also license our accelerator in the form of a product then to enterprises so that they can work themselves using those accelerators and develop those solutions.
Maybe Ravi, what are the type of models that means it's a kind of a platform as a service, or what are the different models we provide this service? And that is another question.
Yes. So the models that we provide are threefold. At its simplicity, what we do is a platform as a service where we expose the core capabilities of the platform and through APIs, and you can then use those APIs. For example, we have our own framework to create a data pipeline and the model training and validation afterwards, and this framework can be coupled with a TensorFlow and then made available as a platform as a service, and then you will only use APIs to input the data, configure and also sort of do the problem setup, and then take back the predictions back into your application. So platform as a service is a simple way of achieving this in an accelerated fashion, and we can also couple the tools that we bring with our own resources, in which case we will do a custom solution build for you using our tools, and we will be able to deploy these tools back in your data centers or in premises, and leave behind the solution for you to manage, or we can actually do it as an AMC model too. So that's the second mode of doing this. And the third mode of doing this is, which is what we call solution as a service. So I talked about platform as a service. I also talked about analytics services with professional services. And the last is a solution as a service where you don't have to worry about all these. You simply need AI and predictions. You input the data through an API, and we give back the predictions through an API. So we have actually deployed this kind of a solution as a service many times as well.
I think that's it, Ravi. I think on single question, something on the OEM lines do we offer?
Yes, on the OEM side, we have partnered with several companies. In fact, for example, we have a partnership with Tableau to ensure that whatever we are doing in terms of AI can be reported in Tableau. So we are open to such partnerships. If you have a solution or a technology that can couple with our solution or technology, we can get into an OEM license, and you can embed our solution within your solution and then deploy it in your offices or in your customers' offices as well.
That's it, Ravi.
Right. So thanks all, and thank you for also keeping this in time. I hope it was useful, and we once again thank you for spending your valuable time with us. Have a good day.